It's the day before the election. That's right. The elections will be held tomorrow, November 5th, 2024. And shortly later that evening, or maybe the following day, we'll know who the next president of the United States is, whether it is the return of Donald Trump to office or whether it is Kamala Harris getting a promotion from vice president to president. But we'll know all of that hopefully by November 6th, November 7th at the latest, or who knows how long this whole process will take, and whether it'll be a close race or a blowout. Different people are predicting different things. I actually was up late last night, as I was telling Rick Rosner, watching the Minnesota Vikings game because I am a fan of that team, and we went on to victory and are just a little bit behind the Detroit Lions and all along those lines. But right after the game, what did I see but a commercial from former President Trump, in which he was touting the fact that we might be heading toward World War III if Kamala was elected and that the economy was in bad shape. And he said that that was because of reports that he had heard and all along those lines, even though there might be some disagreement about those reports and all in that kind of space. But we'll talk about that. We'll talk about other things as well. But that is what I saw on the news and all along those lines. And on a sad note, before I get to some of the world news and all along those lines, and definitely get to some of the things happening on the political landscape, a true musical legend has passed away. Quincy Jones died at the age of 91, and he was known for a lot of things, from We Are the World, which we might need at this particular day and time, to definitely being part of the career of Michael Jackson and even part of the career of people like Frank Sinatra and others. But he was definitely a true musical legend and was also involved in the film world, having been involved in Roots and a number of other things as well. So, like I said, a true musical legend has passed on, and maybe folks that are joining us may have comments about that as well. But we'll get to that in a minute also. But let me get to the world news. The pro-EU candidate has won the Moldavia runoff despite fears of Russian interference. So Moldavia's pro-Western president won the vote, and definitely they're saying that that was overshadowed by the chance of Russian interference. So Germany accused Russia of massive efforts to stop Moldavians from abroad from voting, and Zelensky voiced solidarity with Moldavia's Sandu after her election. And Iran apparently wants to hold the region hostage with retaliation up, according to some analysis that's out there from the Jerusalem Post. And Iran has vowed a strong and complex attack on Israel, according to the Wall Street Journal. Iran to use more powerful warheads and other weapons in a planned attack on Israel, is what one of the reports is saying. And the Israeli military is denying a strike on a Gaza vaccination clinic, and thousands of children in Gaza got their second dose of the polio vaccine. So the statement by UNCF Executive Director Catherine Russell on a deadly weekend of attacks in northern Gaza is something that is out there on UNICEF, and folks can check that out as well. So it looks like the vaccine center and aid officials' car was bombarded in Gaza, according to the UN, and that came out yesterday. And a bus plunged into the Himalayan gorge in North India, killing at least 36 people. And that was after that bus had fallen into that particular gorge. And they're saying dozens were killed as the buses lost control, skidded off the Himalayan road in India, and plunged into that deep gorge. And heavy rains in Barcelona, where actually one of our presidents of the network is disrupting the rail service as troops search for more flood victims. So furious residents in Spain's Valencia feel abandoned after the historic flood, with more rain on the way. So Barcelona airport floods with 70 flights canceled and train affected. I know that they were saying that Nick was having issues with the internet, and that could be part of the reasons for the incidences with the internet and all along those lines. And police have arrested a Netanyahu aide as opponents accuse him of seeking intelligence to thwart the elections and all along those lines. So workers in Netanyahu's office are accused of leaking classified documents in that particular country. So we'll see what's going on in that. And I guess they were saying they were not trying to thwart the election, but thwart hostage talks in as opposed to the election. But whatever they were trying to thwart, they have arrested somebody in that area. And a trial has opened in France in the beheading of a teacher over a Prophet cartoons. So that's something else that we're seeing in the news as well. And Indonesia's Mount Lawatapi Laki volcano erupts, killing 10 people in that part of the world. So that's something going on in Indonesia. And North Korean soldiers are facing first combat in Russia's Kursk region. So definitely Ukraine says North Korean military was attacked in the Kursk region, and captured Russian soldier says North Koreans opened fire on his unit. So definitely that's something else going on. And definitely it looks like folks are still trying to get some negotiations going on in that part of the world as well. And the China space station crew has returned to Earth after 6 months in space. So China's Chenzhou 18 astronauts returned to Earth after 6 months in space. So that's something else that is going on as well. And angry crowds booed and threw eggs at the Spanish king as he visited flood-hit Valencia. So Queen Letizia and King Felipe were hit by mud from protesters amid outrage at deaths from the flash flooding in Spain. So it looks like that's something else going on as well. And in the Middle East, Israel has informed the UN that the 1967 agreement recognizing the UNRW is void. So definitely Israel has notified UN of UNRW work termination. So definitely that is something else going on as well. And smog will shut schools down in Pakistan's second largest city for a week. So Lahore air pollution has hit historic highs, forcing school closures. So Pakistan province calls for climate diplomacy with India as record smog chokes major cities. So this is the world's most polluted city. Some folks are saying 6 times worse than Delhi. So definitely we'll see how this all plays out as well in some of the news things that are taking place. Let me get to some of the U.S. news because, like I said, it is definitely about the elections and all along those lines. Harris and Trump to hold their final camp events days before the election. So the latest news, New York Times Siena poll of 7 battleground states has been released, and it looks like there is definitely a deadlock going on. A lot of the polls are showing almost like a statistical neck and neck and all along those lines. So we'll see how this all plays out as the election, like I said, is tomorrow. There are some people that are saying in certain regions the weather may impact what's going on. I think there's rain expected in one of the states that is dealing as a swing state. I believe that's Pennsylvania, and all along those lines. And in Oklahoma, several school districts are closed, adjusting their schedules due to a storm threat. So tornado damage relief for those devastated by storms in Hara, Oklahoma, and all along those lines. So the weather is definitely impacting a lot of things as well. And Michigan police are saying 4 were killed and 17 injured after a semi-truck crashed into vehicles stuck in traffic. So I-96 reopened in mid-Michigan after a deadly ferry crash involving semi-truck on Saturday night. So hopefully they get that all cleared out, as that is another bellwether state that could be impacted by things like wrecks and trying to get to your polling place and all along those lines. But like I said, that was a while back, and hopefully they've cleared that out and it won't impact folks voting tomorrow. But we'll see what else goes on that might impact folks in Michigan and all along those lines. But if you're wondering about the hurricane season, yeah, it's still going on. And Raphael could threaten the U.S. later this week. So Tropical Depression 18 forms in Caribbean as strengthening into Hurricane Raphael appears likely. So definitely it looks like there could be at least another storm heading our way and all along those lines. And Republicans are bringing back fake electors in the battleground states. So definitely is there an article in the Daily Beast saying the 2020 fake electors are back and ready to cause more chaos. So we'll see how that all plays out as well. So definitely looks like the control over Congress is up for grabs on election day as well. As a matter of fact, one of the news articles not news articles, TV ads I saw was actually asking people to vote for the Democratic candidates, because if the Democrats win the House, then Hakeem Jeffries would be the first African American to be heading that prestigious organization, and all along those lines. So definitely we'll see what goes on in that space. And RFK is talking about fluoride. He's saying that it's an industrial waste linked to cancer and disease. So he's definitely out there talking about that. And even Tim Scott is saying Americans aren't talking about fluoride. So definitely looks like he's bringing up some issues around fluoride and all along those lines. And a lot of people, and then I'm going to bring my folks up and everything along those lines, are still talking about the Puerto Rican remarks. Rubio on Trump rally comedian Puerto Rico comments says tasteless, but it wasn't Trump that said it. So definitely that's something going on. And Democrats are making a final push to boost Puerto Rican support after the insult at that particular rally and all along those lines. And apparently Trump is fired up about an animal in New York, as was Elon Musk. But apparently both Trump and Elon Musk are fired up about the euthanasia of Peanut, the squirrel. So apparently the man who took in Peanut, the orphan squirrel, says it's surreal officials euthanize his pet. But definitely it looks like Elon Musk is even spending the final days before the election posting about Peanut the squirrel, and I think he was even bringing out how it could be impacting the government and all along those lines. But it's quite fascinating, some of these stories and all along those lines. But I'll bring in Sasha Starr, bring in Rick Rosner, bring in Jacoby, and I think I've got Shaquille with me as well and everything. And that's all we've got here with us today and all along those lines. But Rick, any thoughts about this?
Yeah. So this is how ridiculous the campaign has gotten in the final days. Trump has trouble with his mic at a rally, so for some reason he simulates giving oral sex to the mic, which I don't know, doesn't seem very presidential. Then Peanut the squirrel. This guy has an unlicensed animal rescue, and he's got to have this squirrel for 7 years. And to raise money for the animal rescue, he'll make little videos of the squirrel wearing a hat. He's in New York State. Some a-hole lady named Monica in Texas files a complaint about, for who knows what reason, and New York State authorities confiscate the guy's squirrel, perfectly harmless, perfectly tame, can't live in the wild, and his raccoon, and then they kill him to study to make sure they don't have rabies. Apparently you have to kill the animal to autopsy the brain to see about rabies. They didn't have rabies, they were house pets. But this has fuck all to do with the presidential election. And so it's crazy that Republicans are saying, this is an example of overreach and you should vote for the Republican because of a euthanized squirrel because of an overzealous Department of Wildlife in New York State.
It wasn't just a squirrel. I think the gentleman had a squirrel.
Raccoon too. Also a raccoon.
I thought it was a raccoon too. It was a squirrel and a raccoon. It's one that
also he had an alpaca, but they left the alpaca alone. He has a bunch of animals. There's one theory that says the guy's a good-looking guy, and he also had an OnlyFans page where he'd put up sexy pictures of himself and sexy pictures of himself with his good-looking girlfriend. And some people theorize the Texas lady didn't like. Who knows?
But Rick,
this is coming off the back of Kathy Hochul telling people that if they vote for Donald Trump, they're anti-woman and anti-American. So there's a lot of rhetoric going around. Whoever anonymously dobbed him in, they should be ashamed of themselves personally. But New York State, I think, could have dealt with this situation better. The man was not accused of mistreating these animals.
No,
he's somebody that he's trying to. From what I understand of the story, it's been a while since I've read it now, but I think the mother of the squirrel had died or something like that, so he took the little baby squirrel and cared for it and nurtured it. He's obviously an animal lover and a wildlife, if you call it that, a wildlife supporter. So he's a good man, trying to do something nice. And New York State comes in and just does that for him. So, of course, people are going to get their back up.
Yeah, definitely. That's one of the things going on. I can't say one way or the other, as one that is actually one of the few people on the panel that way back when actually had a pet raccoon, but that was when I was a kid and all along those lines. So, and definitely it went off into the wild because pets like that will often go into the wild. So it did not stay around long and everything along those lines because it decided it wanted to go court an actual a raccoon out in its community in rural North Carolina. So I did have it for a brief moment and all along those lines. There was actually a woman that was actually here on the network not that long ago that also had one of those kind of unlicensed sanctuaries. I think she might have been in Indiana or one of the other areas, but I do remember that she had one of those kind of like pet zoos that are not official zoos and all along those lines. So is this something we got to be concerned about, these animals that are maybe being kept? Because I remember there was that whole rumor way back when, you may remember this, Jacoby, of the person that had the alligator, and I think it was one of those urban myths that the alligator then got into the sewer system and all along those lines, and that was decades ago, but I do remember hearing that story. So do we need to be concerned about wayward animals?
Wayward, wayward people who decide to buy wild animals thinking that they can domesticate wild animals, that'd be the crazy part. I mean, I'm just happy to find out that you used to be Davy Crockett with a raccoon.
Yeah, I also had a goat, had a couple of other animals. That's when I was living in the country. So we had a couple of pets. We even had a pet rabbit way back when. So yeah, I might have been David Crockett. I can tell you one thing as a farm person, and we can get to some of the more serious news and everything. And maybe Sasha can relate to this as he grew up in Russia, if I remember correctly. If you want to have your mind changed about animals for at least a minute or even food and everything, watch a rabbit get gutted. Because I think my dad actually invited me to see that we were living that rural life and everything. And yeah, there for a minute, I'm not gonna say I don't eat meat because I'd be lying, but it did kind of like make me think about it there for a minute because it was not a pleasant sight.
Yeah, nature is a mofo. That we have to slaughter the innocent to get meat is a sad like byproduct of evolution. And I look forward to a future where they figure out how to breed meat animals without brains, so there's no suffering.
I thought they already do that with chickens.
I know, freaking chicken. It's a chicken apocalypse every day in America. I think we slaughter, 10 billion chickens in America. It's.
Well, speaking of apocalypse, and
come on, you've walked into it. I'm going to be the first one. I'm going to have to be the first one to throw insults out. I thought they did that with humans. They were called Democrats.
Oh, don't go there. But speaking of insults and speaking along those lines and everything, I did have a question for everybody because some people say that he is a conspiracy theorist. Some people say that he's not. I've been actually watching Criminal Minds lately, and they were having a whole story arc about what's the difference between a conspiracy theory and a conspiracy, and they had some interesting ideas in that space and everything. But my question to everybody is, apparently, because I know and hopefully everybody here is doing it on a regular basis, we try to brush our teeth and try to do things along those lines, but now fluoride is problematic according to
it's freaking not. Oh my God, no. It's a problem if you overdose on it, which you can't do from water. So putting RFK in charge of our health in charge of women's health. The guy raped his nanny. His second wife killed herself after she found his extramarital sex diary detailing contact with 37 women in a single year. All right, he stands for some good stuff, but mostly he's an a-hole.
What does any of that have to do with him being in charge of health and the quality of food?
Well, because he's not a doctor, he's not a scientist, and he believes a bunch of crap.
Yeah, but that's the case with most people that are in charge of certain departments. They rarely have any experience or qualifications in that specific area.
So the thing with RFK Jr. is that, one, he pushes conspiracy theories, such as the vaccines cause autism. That's debunked. It's been debunked multiple times, but yet he continues to push it. He's one of the heads of the anti-vax movement. Also, he pushes junk science on pretty much every element around healthcare. So he would be one of the worst people to have in charge of any type of healthcare or any type of science in the country because of the fact he pushes junk science. He pushes anti-vax, or he pushes anti-vax and anti-science. He's just horrible in that manner.
If you want to put him in charge of fitness, that's fine. There have been fitness czars in the past. It's kind of a ceremonial thing. Like Schwarzenegger says, get out and exercise. And RFK Jr. does. He takes replacement testosterone, so he's jacked, and he works out. So put him in charge of fitness, but don't put him in charge of freaking science.
So let me just say a couple of things. So firstly, I think when he's talking about the overuse of ultra-processed foods, I think he has got a point. And I think there's lots of things in the food system in the United States and by extension in Canada that could be improved. So I don't see a problem with that. I actually think that should be a Democratic position, not a Republican position. But he hasn't got a space in the Democratic Party anymore. So, look, some of the things that he says, especially the anti-vax stuff, okay, the science doesn't support him. But the medical industry, or the medical fraternity, for lack of better words, has brought some of this upon themselves. They've bred mistrust because of their handling of COVID and many other things, because of the way that the pharmaceutical industry has lobbied the AMA. A lot of that's been brought about by themselves. And in relation to him using testosterone, look, I think that we should be conducting some studies on this. We know that for women that going through menopause, oftentimes hormone replacement therapy and estrogen and stuff like that can help. We also know that testosterone decreases in males as they age. We also know that across the whole population, testosterone appears to have dropped for these generations compared to what they were generations ago. Maybe it's worth us looking at causal reasons as to why that's happening, and also treatments such as testosterone to help men to develop more naturally the way that they should, and to help women develop more naturally as they should. I don't see the problem with that.
So just to push back, you don't wear a broken clock because it tells you the time at that time that it broke. You don't wear that. So and that as an analogy. So he can say, oh yeah, hey, processed foods, but then he goes down the rabbit hole. And that's the problem. Giving him access, an individual, again, he pushes anti-vax, he pushes junk science, he pushes all these conspiracy theories and crazy nuttiness out there, giving that legitimacy at the top, not to mention the anti-Semitism and the women stuff that even Rick just talked about. Giving that legitimacy at the top is a problem there. And to say that, oh, the science community brought this on themselves. No, they didn't. Who brought this on them was actually the individuals who followed Donald Trump, who campaigned against science while he was in office.
Well, it didn't work during COVID.
And did the Democrats said that they wouldn't have the vaccine and that was developed under him? Those people?
That theory of putting the wrong people in charge killed millions of people. He doesn't seem to have the brain thought to put together the right people, like hiring back the pandemic team, or putting a real physician in position of this. Instead, they try to sell everyone on injecting themselves with disinfector and hydrochlorine that can kill you. So I just think that you need to put people in place, positions like this, that are highly skilled, highly educated, and highly experienced in that area. And I think Kennedy is a good spokesperson for what he's trying to do, because a lot of people listen to him, but I don't think he should be head of anything medical. So that's my point.
And the thing, what Kim just pointed out is perfect in terms of what Trump did in office. Dr. Fauci was talking about particular things. He's been around for decades and decades and decades, and helped out with many pandemics, many things that we have gone through, epidemics, all the other stuff, all the science that is there. He has been partially in charge of or a part of. And what ended up happening is that Donald Trump wanted to push, hydroxychloroquine, which showed no efficacy at the time, but he wanted to push it because he told everybody, well, it's just going to go away like it came in April. No, as people are dying. And he legitimately said, oh, well, we're going to try this we're going to try putting light under the skin and injecting people or trying different disinfectants and all this other stuff. That created a spike at poison control as soon as he said that. So when he's campaigning against these things, drawing this idea that we should not trust these individuals who've been in these areas for so long, that created a problem. So it wasn't that the medical community created this insecurity in the area. It was because there was legitimately a campaign of an individual who was a huge influence on half of the country, and half of the country ended up paying the price. If you look at actually the individuals who died based on that campaign alone, more people died that were Republican than that were Democrat. And that was based on the fact that those Republicans, or that MAGA wing, trusted what Donald Trump was saying. And he campaigned against it, just like he's doing against the vote. He's putting out information about you can't trust voting and everything. So when he's going against things that are against him, or he feels that are against and negative and not positive for him, that causes a buzz in his collective, and his collective doesn't trust these places.
Yeah, Jacoby,
Okay,
because I had a question for everybody on the panel, because one of the things that I read recently, and I don't know what it is, but there is this notion that if we get into a very close election, that there's some sort of secret that exists between Mike Johnson, the leader of one of the legislative bodies, and Trump and everything, but nobody knows what the secret is. And even Trump says that that's the merit of a secret, that you don't say what the secret is and everything. But they're trying to figure out if it has to do with the electoral college, if we come down to a statistical tie, or what it could be or what it could not be and everything. Does anybody have any theory as to what this secret could be? Like I said, I've read a couple of different articles and a couple of people that have had.
Well, it's not much of a secret that if the electoral college doesn't give either party 270 votes, it goes to the House. Each state gets a vote as to who president should be. And there are more states, like 26, 27, that will vote Republican than Democrat. So in the case of a tie, the House will give the presidency to Trump. That's not a secret.
But the catch to that, Rick, is that
sorry, can I respond, because you changed the topic so far away from what I want to respond to. Can I just respond to what Jacoby and Kimberly said, please?
Please.
So, Jacoby, I feel like you guys are being quite selective in how you're describing what occurred during 2020. When people complain that the vaccines, that there was some conflicting information. For example, can you mix Pfizer with Moderna? Or in Australia, we were told to take the AstraZeneca. It was safer than Pfizer, and then it didn't work, and we had spikes as a result. What I've heard a lot recently, including from some doctors that show up on this network, is that things were evolving, things were changing, and the scientists didn't know. So I don't see why it's a problem for Donald Trump to say, look, is hydroxychloroquine something that we could potentially use? I don't think it's a problem for him to talk about other alternative treatments while the vaccines were being developed. You make the statement that Republicans, had a higher death rate because they listened to Donald Trump. Well, I don't think that that's a provable thing. It could be that people who are less trusting of the medical system are more likely to be Republican. It's certainly possible that people who live in rural areas don't have as much access to healthcare as perhaps what they do in the big cities. I think you're distilling the issue down to something it shouldn't be. And the issue about him having gotten rid of scientists and not listening to them and things like that, and that he was pushing all of this anti-vax stuff, I think it should be remembered that many Democrats, many high-profile Democrats, including Kamala Harris, made the statement they would not take a vaccine that was developed under Donald Trump. Okay, Democrats said that. So to sort of rewrite history as though this was just a Republican thing and it was just a Donald Trump thing, I don't think that holds weight. And again, if you look at outside of the United States, there were similar kinds of confusions and mistrust in other Western countries. It can't all be Donald Trump's fault. And I think you can't just sit there and blame Donald Trump for everything. And I'll also just remind everybody that after the horrendous events of September 11, there were all sorts of conspiracy theories that Republicans were behind that. that Republicans had actually allowed it, and George Bush had allowed it to happen in order to make a profit out of Halliburton and other companies, Lockheed Martin and other companies that were involved in the military system. Nobody sat there and said, "Oh, they're all just conspiracy theories; they should be taken down." Michael Moore made a movie about it, and he's considered to be a hero. But when the right does it, all of a sudden they're out of line. All of a sudden they're pushing misinformation. I don't think that that's fair. I don't think it's reasonable. And just lastly, in the 2007-8 financial calamity, what did we see there? We saw actually people on the left and people on the right getting very, very upset with the banks. And they said that clearly the financial industry is in bed with government because no bankers went to jail for it. And maybe what they did was they did it deliberately in order to be able to cause a recession so they could buy up assets very cheap. Now, is that true? I don't know. I don't think so. But certainly we're able to push conspiracy theories for that. But as soon as anybody says anything about the Democrats, oh, no, you can't do that. You're pushing conspiracy theories.
I think you're being disingenuous. You're being our Scott Jennings. Florida has a post-vax COVID death rate 220% of California's. Red states have a 50% higher death rate after the vaccine was available than blue states.
And your point is what?
Shaq, just to point out
that Trump politicized the vax. He politicized. I mean,
so if that's the case, then it would have to be unique to the United States. The fact that it's not unique to the United States would indicate that it's not just Donald Trump. So, it is perhaps a reflection of the way that people.
Or you could argue that Trump's bullshit spread around.
Well, I don't think so. I don't think that's certainly not the case in Australia and New Zealand. But people who vote a certain way very often are going to have similar mindsets about things. Right, people who vote blue are going to have similar.
They call it the bully pulpit. It's the president's one of the president's jobs is to get out there and say stuff and promote things for the public.
So what are you suggesting that when Democrats say what they say, that has no effect?
Let's let Sasha speak. Sasha, what do you have to say?
Shaquille, I would like to remind you when you rely on 9/11 and financial crisis of 2007-8, and you are talking about division of left and right or Republican Democrats or so on. I'm sorry to remind you that there was no such a division even close in those years as it came during the Trump's first term and thereafter. It's still there. Only sound defeat of Trump tomorrow, if it will happen, it will end this horrible division and fights, because what he is doing, even in his final days of his campaign, he's divider. He's talking about how he's going to be vindictive and punish all the people who were against him, who were voting against him, or so on. And instead, Kamala Harris, she's projecting that I want to be president and unite all people in the United States of America. This is the drastic contrast. And what's apparently interesting is that Fareed Zakaria yesterday in his program, he said that there are pros and cons on both candidates, and everybody will vote according to his or her understanding. But to me, personally, the January 6th of 2021 overshadows everything about validity of Donald Trump being president or Kamala Harris. I'm not praising Kamala Harris at all, and I don't agree with many of her policies. But that just one day, January 6th of 2021, overshadows everything.
I mentioned something earlier. I'm going to bring up another incident.
I'd like to respond.
I'm going to respond because this is actually to everybody, and it's somewhat tied in, but not totally tied in. Because I mentioned a song you sometimes tease me, Shaquille, about liking Imagine and everything. But another song that I really had a great deal of respect for, and it's actually based on some conversations I had over the weekend, including with people on this network and all along these lines. But there was a very popular song made by a gentleman named Quincy Jones, who just recently passed away, called We Are the World. And I sometimes am fearful that no matter who wins, because it does seem like we have this serious divide going on, like 50% or 49% like Kamala, 49% are the MAGA wing or like Trump and everything. So no matter who wins tomorrow, is everybody's on this panel. Do you think that we are heading toward a kind of the antithesis of We Are the World? Because We Are the World was about this notion that we can all get along no matter where we are in the world. And they brought together musicians from all over the world, everybody from Sting to Cher to a number of other people, Michael Jackson, Prince, and everybody came to that particular famous event and everything. So have we moved so far away from the We Are the World phenomenon that we can't come back, particularly here in the United States? But you bring up, Shaquille, even around the world and everything. So have we moved so far away from that concept, which Quincy was very proud of? And by the way, I never knew the man, but I read enough about him to know that he was proud of that achievement and everything.
I don't think that we've moved as far as it feels. I do think that Sasha just expressed it correctly, because if you look at the way both candidates are sending up their closing arguments, one is definitely talking about, look, we got to stop this. We got to work together. We got to do this. We got to do this together. The other is really attacking others who say anything he feels that is ungrateful to him. And it is, for example, Alan Lichtman just picked, he's picked 9 out of the last 10 elections.
And he's been
He just picked Kamala Harris to win. He's already received hate mail for doing that. There have been death threats and all these attacks that have been going on. The man just said, he wouldn't mind, if they have to get to me, they'd have to shoot through the media, and I wouldn't mind that if they did that. That's threatening. These things are threatening and attacking. So I think that, and this goes back to even talking about how we were just speaking about the vaccines and how it is a fact. And Rick just brought up, and it is unique to the U.S. how split that is, that those in red states had that higher death rate than those in blue states, because it is true in those rural counties, they hear from the individual that they trust the most, which happens to be this individual. And if this individual at the top is going to consistently say, you can't say anything bad about me, or you're the enemy within, or you're hateful in this, and you have the person at the top on this side in an imaginary world that says, hey, let's work together. That's a difference, that two different societies there. So I don't think that we are as separate as we are. We're just being led by two different ideas right now. And if one disappears, as Sasha said perfectly, if that one goes away or begins to that control begins to dissipate, and the other begins to be the voice of what's going on, yes, we'll get back to that. We Are the World. We'll get back to more or less working together and not hating each other so much.
There is some concern in my heart about the way Trump does use the evil within, the way he riles up the Proud Boys and his patriots to destruct things as opposed to not. My concern is, if he loses, how much damage will be done? If he wins, will they allow him to use the military to kill the evil within? Because if you hear his speeches, he says that the evil within, the Democrats, whatever he calls them, the scum, are the truest and more scariest evil than China. He uses this in his speeches, and it's unnerving, and it's scary because people take him serious. And I want to make a correction about something that was said Friday. When people put their children into a private school, and that private school has dress codes and restrictions for hundreds of years or whatever, parents shouldn't register their kids in those schools if they want them to wear jewelry, crosses, because most of these schools that are private, they have these dress codes and restrictions. No jewelry, definitely no jewelry. Some of them have permitted watches because it's more of a tool. but they have these dress codes and limitations and restrictions for a reason. And if a parent doesn't like those rules, it's a private school. Go to another school, but stop gaslighting and condemning.
That's not what happened.
The church
That's not what happened.
but stop condemning a church for saying this is a dress code or a restriction, and that's the story I read. And
No, that's not what happened in Melbourne at all.
But if a parent doesn't like it, instead of fighting it, they should just go to another school.
Kimberly,
my friend didn't like the rules that were going on at her schools, and she just went and started her own school and got people who think like them, and they're a private school. And, they teach. But if you don't like something, don't condemn the school and call them names. Just let the parents go somewhere else. I think that this world has become, everyone wants to be a victim and victimize themselves like Trump does. Oh, I raped women and subjected them to sexual offenses and stuff like that, but I'm the victim. And
I don't think he's ever said anything like
that. We see this a lot. But my biggest
concern
is
Sasha said something to me. What are we going to do now? Go to Rick and then finally come back to me?
But I think Rick's turn. I think it's Rick's
Shaq,
turn.
because you mentioned something. Let Shaq respond.
No, go for it, Rick. Go for it. I'll wait. I'll pay.
All right. Okay. So the deal in 1992, a guy named Francis Fukuyama wrote a book called The End of History. And it was popular for 20 years about how we've moved beyond war and conflict and we've become more mature than that. And that turned out not to be true. If you look at the world now, social media and as a tool to make people riled up and crazy has risen in the past since the rise of the smartphone. And now we are full of conflict. It's because the world is changing, because of our technology changing. And the next wave might be AI manipulating us and the people who know how to use AI. A new version of ChatGPT just came out that's better at generating its own ideas. So we tried it out. We said, all right, ChatGPT new version, pitch us some screenplay ideas. And within like 6 seconds, it came up with like half a dozen really good screenplay ideas. That's freaking scary. And stuff like that is going to continue to roil the world.
Well, along those same lines, I did want to hear from you, Shaquille, because you would know more about Melbourne than I would and everything. But there's this notion of what you can prove or not prove is even somewhat haunting the GOP as well, because apparently a Republican senator from Montana is even admitting that there are no records to prove the story of his gunshot wound. So even Tim Sheehy is saying that there is no real record to prove that he was shot, even though apparently he might have been shot and everything. But
no, he shot himself, if we're talking about the same guy. And then he said, yeah, it happened in war. He screwed up and shot himself. So, but yeah, there are always going to be idiot politicians who lie about stuff on both sides.
On both sides, no doubt. Shaquille, if you want to respond to Melbourne?
Well, I wanted to respond to Sasha first. Sasha, in relation to Donald Trump and the division, Joel Jamal, who's the head of Turning Point Australia, he used to be a Bernie bro. And he points this out all the time, that in the Great Recession times, people across the political aisle were absolutely furious at the banks and the big financial institutions for their recklessness in trashing the economy. And with the trading of securities and credit default swaps and all the rest of it, and all of a sudden, where everybody come together, and the whole like Occupy Wall Street, all these groups had come together across partisan lines, all of a sudden they all just dissipate and end up fighting with each other. Now, where does that division come from? Now, with Donald Trump, look, you can look through rose-tinted glasses, or you can look through very angry glasses at somebody. What mainstream media has done, ever since he came down those escalators, he has been depicted where every single thing that he says wrong, every time he makes a gaffe or says something that could be taken out of context, it is amplified across big media. They don't generally do that with the Democrats. What they do is they make the Democrats look really good all of the time. Now, most people are not going to have the time to consume media from a whole heap of different sources, so they get their information from one or two sources. They flick on the news, they just see what's happening, and they form an opinion. And they're repeating this very negative image of Donald Trump. Now, if Donald Trump wins, I think he will. Who knows? Well, we'll find out tomorrow, or in a few weeks, depending on how things go. If Donald Trump wins, he has a choice before him. He can act to unify the country, or he can act to divide the country even further. It's my hope that he'll actually try to unify the country. Only time will tell. If Kamala Harris wins, I'll pray that she's going to be a good leader. I really will. My fear is that her policies will create an economic catastrophe for the United States. That's my personal view. I hope that doesn't happen. I hope that I'm wrong. If she becomes the president, that she does a magnificent job. Kimberly, what you've said there, I think, misconstrues the situation. They're not having a go at the church. These are Christian parents sending their Christian children to a Christian school where the kids were allowed to wear crosses and were then told to remove the crosses, whilst other kids were wearing pride and transgender pins and rainbow-coloured hair ties, which was against the school rules. That's what's been reported.
School rules.
That is what has been.
According to the document I read. So
that is what has been reported in our media.
Jewelry. Then you don't have.
That is what has been reported in our media. Now,
Right.
MLC is a school that exists in many states. There is a Methodist Ladies College in Western Australia. It was actually one of the sister schools to one of the schools that I went to, because I went to an all-boys private school. Okay, I know girls that went there, and they were allowed to wear crosses. There were some restrictions on jewelry. Okay, but from what I understand from talking to some of the kids over there, or some of the parents of some of the kids down there, they were even told that they couldn't wear crucifix lapels at the same time as kids were allowed to wear transgender lapels. So what I'm saying is, I don't think it's fair for you to just simply say, well, the parents should just pull their kids out. What the parents are saying is, if our kids have to take their crosses off, I think that those kids should be told that they can't wear their pride and transgender things. Okay, fair is fair. You seem to be suggesting that all the Christian parents should pull their kids out of a Christian school in order to make the two students that go to that school feel better. No, I don't think so.
You don't like the rules, leave. It's a private school. That's
okay, so why not apply that?
There is no.
So why not apply that to those kids
in a private school? That's what.
Why not apply that then? Why not apply that to the kids that want to wear the transgender and gay pride stuff? That is against the teachings of that particular school.
According to the document,
it is also against. Can I please finish?
Jewelry.
Can I please finish? You get very upset with me when I.
Right.
You get very upset with me when I cut people off. Can I please finish?
I'm just explaining that what I read said that nobody was allowed to wear any jewelry, and that was the issue. So
as I said before,
transgender or not. So
as I said before, this also applies to lapel pins and all sorts of other things. If the students that are going to that school are saying that they are offended by crosses and etc., okay, then they should go to a different school. Why should everybody else cater to them? Yeah, I grew up in a family that was half Muslim, and the family that I was, the other half were Christian. The family that I was closest to were Muslim, and I went to an Anglican school. You know what? I participated in the choir. I sometimes had to do Bible study. I didn't throw a tantrum about it, because that's the kind of school that I went to. All right? Well, you don't go in there and then try to force people not to, or force the whole school curriculum to change because you're not comfortable. Suck it up.
So it also has rules about long hair as well.
Trump. Let's talk about Trump.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I know. That's why I left a private school, so I could grow my hair long. Right? That was why I left.
Trump has had endless opportunities over the past 9 years to campaign and govern as a centrist, and he never has. The idea that if he becomes president again, that somehow he'll become a centrist, there's no frickin' way.
Well, I strongly disagree with you, Rick. I strongly disagree with you. If you actually have a look at a lot of his policies are about doing things that the political right and the centre-right political parties of the Western world have really dropped the ball on. They've dropped the ball on things like funding for older people. They've dropped the ball on education, healthcare, and all those sorts of things. Centre-right political parties have done an abysmal job of that. Okay, they've dropped the ball on climate change, something that I always talk about when I talk to centre-right political parties around the world. Now, Donald Trump is also taken a position which is not traditionally a Republican position. He's taken an anti-war position. Now, he just made a statement about Liz Cheney where he said words to the effect of, She wouldn't like it if she was out there. She's a war hawk, but she wouldn't like it if she was out there and she had guns pointed at her. And what did the mainstream media do? The mainstream media took that and twisted it into him saying that she should be put in front of a firing squad. It was so bad that Jake Tapper from CNN actually had to call it out and say that's not what he said. Okay? This is what I'm talking about. This is the reason why people have lost faith in what the media is saying to them, because whilst what they're saying oftentimes is technically correct and technically true, what they're actually doing is they're amplifying every negative thing in the most negative way that they possibly can. Sasha talks about January 6th. January 6th should never have happened. Now, depending on which side of the aisle you're on and depending on how you want to see it, you're either going to say that he incited an insurrection or incited a riot or whatever words you want to use, or you're going to say it's Nancy Pelosi's fault. She should have had the National Guard there, and it was just a peaceful protest. But I don't know. I'm not going to judge on that. It shouldn't have happened. I know that. Okay. But what we've seen is during those few years, especially after George Floyd died, we saw cities being overrun. We saw all sorts of violence, and it permeated around the world as well. We saw buildings being burned down. We saw police stations being taken over. I mean, here in Australia, we had a situation where Black Lives Matter protesters were protesting during COVID lockdowns, and the police were taking a knee to those protesters. However, when there was an anti-lockdown protest, the police brutally treated the protesters. They took them and threw them to the ground, etc., etc. Surely you can understand why some people are saying, hang on a minute, you guys have done the same thing, okay? Kimberly says that it's scary when people, when Donald Trump talks about the enemy within. You've had the Democrats say that they need to that MAGA is a bigger threat, and white nationalism is a bigger threat than terrorism. Okay, you're talking about them looking at the National Guard, looking at the military, etc., etc. You spoke for 4 minutes the other day, just let me finish, and you'll get a shot. You've seen all of this kind of thing go on. Okay, at the hands of the Democrats. You've had Joe Biden come out and talk about the MAGA crowd and this and that. And then you guys are sitting there saying, oh, well, Donald Trump says something that's scary. Hey, it's a two-way street.
All right, let Rick talk and then to Toby, and then
I'm okay. All right.
Just a quick couple of things. Just to point out, one, the thing in Melbourne that just took place, so we don't really know what's going on. That just I just was looking and reading it up and everything. It does say that they're trying to put in stricter rules on hair, makeup, and jewelry. So I can see that getting caught up, and it is just like you're talking about, Shaq, especially right now. That people could take that one thing, that one nugget, and say, well, you can't wear crosses. And oh my gosh, now you're looking at this. So that could be a misconstruing of actually what just took place, because it looks like it just happened, because they did do a ban on mullets 2 years ago and people were upset at that.
It's not a misconstruing at all.
I'm trying to go fast so you can get back in.
Rick needs to come in.
I don't have a thing to say right now.
Okay.
In terms of what Donald Trump said, that was something that you just tried to sanitize. Donald Trump actually rallied earlier a few months ago, said should we put Liz Cheney in front of a firing squad. He said that. That was in what he said.
That's just Yankee talk, according to some people.
When he turns around and then says, how would she feel if she had guns locked in at her face, or had 9 guns or how many guns aiming directly at her face and so on and so forth? Then he tried to correct it because he got pushed back real quick on that. It wasn't
rubbish. That's not what he said at all. Go back and watch it. It's not what he said at all.
It is what he said.
What he did was they played his words. And the problem is, which I tried to point out multiple times, we keep trying to sanitize what this man says. As pointed out at the top with what Rick talked about, there should never be a presidential candidate on this planet that has 50% of the vote right now who's acting like he's giving a blowjob to a microphone on stage. That's what he did. So don't try and sanitize these things. And when you're saying all these people try and distrust, that distrust is coming from him, because he, as you wanted to gloss over your buddy Joel Jamal, who's running Turning Point, and he used to be a Bernie bro. Well, the dude just got sued for trying to hold a function for Donald Trump Jr. because that's his buddy. But you left that out conveniently because you didn't want to point out the fact how tied he is to the Trump family and that whole foundation. So don't try and—
What are you talking about now?
Things that we are talking about. When we play Donald Trump's words, it is not, hey, well, you're just twisting his words. No, we're playing what the man is saying. He is saying some crazy things. Kamala Harris called him a fascist. She never called him she called him a fascist when Anderson Cooper asked her at a town hall. That's the one time she called him a fascist. But she was repeating based off what John Kelly said, because it was Kelly who pointed out and said that he has fascist tendencies, which many people have pointed out. Yet you say nothing when Donald Trump called Kamala Harris a fascist, called Democrats fascists, called Biden a fascist, called all these things. You say absolutely nothing because what you're doing is sanitizing it. And that is the problem that leads us where we are today.
Let me respond. We've only got a couple
He's
minutes left.
being exactly what he accuses us of being selective.
Can I respond? Because you asked us to end the show early.
Right, but he's being selective, just like he accuses us of. You can't be both ways. You have to be.
I'm assuming this is going to be a no. I'm not allowed to respond
on things. But if you're going to sit there and accuse people of things, you need to take a look at what you're doing as well. And, let's just take a look at what's really important. I mean, I look at, the stats, right? How many children a day are dying from gun violence? Does anyone know?
Can I respond to that? Can I respond to your show? We've got like 2 minutes left.
I mean, I think
you've asked us to end the show early, and then you're trying to change the subject.
You know how many migrants die crossing the border? Hundreds of migrants die crossing the border. But we want to spend a lot of money protecting the border and keeping them from dying crossing. But we've got thousands of children, thousands dying. And nobody wants to do anything about it. 40,000 children were exposed to gun violence and mass shootings and death at schools last year. Did anyone campaign on that? No.
So Jacoby's going to say something about me. He's going to say something about Joel Jamal, and then you're going to filibuster so I can't respond. That's brilliant.
About whether they're shot.
That's really brilliant.
And that's the priorities I think that people overlooked, is the reality of what their laws are doing. And I think what they need to do is they need to knuckle down and take a look at what's happening within our country and not threatening us, but saying, let's get together and stop these crimes, because that's a bigger crime than migrants crossing over. It really is right now. We had maybe 4 people die at the hands of migrants. And you know what? They don't even know when those migrants came in. It's speculated now or this year, but actually it could have been during Trump. Trump took $155 million from FEMA and gave it to migrants. $155 million he took from FEMA. Okay. There is no record. They have even addressed it that Biden's administration took FEMA funds to give it to migrants. They have them divided. So take a look at what you're accusing people of before you accuse other people. I've got to dive out. Thank you for joining us. Mark, do a nice wrap because I got to go take care of the other show for Nick. Have a great day, everyone.
Bye there.
That's so cute, right? So now there's not enough time for me to respond to Jacoby's comments about myself and about Joel Jamal and about our connection to the Trump family and the Republican campaign. That's absolutely brilliant. Well done, guys. And I think the audience, if you were under some illusion the audience doesn't see it, I can guarantee you that they do.
Did you tell something else you wanted to add about the connection?
No, we were asked by Kimberly to end the show a minute early so that she could to start another one. So everybody, I think it's clear as day to anybody who was watching that Jacoby had said some things about us that I wanted to respond to, and it was very, very deliberate that somebody else came in to prevent me from speaking and starting to bring up other issues like gun violence and immigration, which was not the issue at hand. It is as clear as day.
On that note, we'll get ready to wrap up the show and everything. So it's that time.